I think they're thinking, God didn't get it right or something. We've always had booms and busts and summer and winter. I mean, it's a part of life. Cycles actually, the play up, and my biggest thesis underneath everything I do, the play of opposites drives everything in life, right down to male and female. That's what creates the energy, the tension between the two. In recessions, people don't realize this, and even more so if you look at depressions, like in the 1930s or something. That's where the greatest innovations emerged, 1930s and 40s, okay, 70s and 80s. You go back in history. It was in challenging times, not in booms. And then all those innovations get tested and they move mainstream more easily in the next boom. So booms and busts. Booms allow the expansion of things that are proven and are driven by generations, I've shown, that are growing up and predictably spending more money in larger numbers. And then the bust, clean everything out and get things efficient and get rid of the zombie companies and bad debts. Nobody makes all the right decisions. Nobody borrows money and always uses it right. What we have now is more bad debt, and more bad debts than when we came into the 2008 downturn, which was the end of the baby boom in North America and most of the world. And so we didn't get to clean that out. So they keep stimulating the economy because they don't want to have a recession since. This is the longest time between, a stock market bottom and a top, or between recessions in all of modern history, 13 years. Normally you'll have a substantial recession every 10 years. And I'll tell you, in the good old days, more like in the 50s and 60s, when there wasn't so much manipulation, we have a smaller recession every 4 years, almost like on the election cycle. So this cleaning out inefficiency is essential to the economy. That's what recessions do. If you want to keep recessions from being bad, well, don't go nuts in the boom, and don't overstimulate in the boom, and don't allow borrowing to go nuts and boom, because that's what people do. The longer things go up, the more optimistic consumers and businesses and banks and lenders get, and the more we get kind of crazy, and then that stuff gets washed out in the downturn. So I think we're coming up on a recession that's been now delayed for many, many years after the 2008-9, and that one was cut in half. That was literally cut in half. That recession should have gone deeper, taken twice as long, and that would have been like the early 30s, and we would have routed all this bad debt stuff and been much more healthy. And then we'd be coming in for a second round now. So I think this is going to happen. We're going to have to see a pretty drastic downturn in debt cleansing in just the next couple of years. This is probably going to happen harder and faster than usual. Now, I know governments will try to fight it, but you got to remember, governments have been fighting this now for 13 years. And when COVID hit, here's what I keep stressing to my newsletter subscribers. You realize just what happened? We had a temporary COVID crisis, and they printed $5.1 trillion in 2 years, more than they printed all before that, since the 2008 recession, and all the stimulus for 10 or 12 years before that. They printed that much in 2 years, and the economy's already tilting back towards recession again by our indicators, which shows you just can't get something for nothing. You can't overstimulate a dead economy. I mean, how many times can people trade up to a better home? That's a big undertaking. I'll trade up again. People don't trade up to a new home every 2 years. Everybody's done that. Everybody's gotten, the car they wanted and stuff. Now things slow down naturally. And I think in this next slowdown, part of what's going to happen is the central banks are going to want to step up again and stimulate even more. But how do you top $5 trillion, 23% of GDP in 2 years in the US economy alone? How do you top that? When something's artificial, it takes more and more to get less and less until it blows up. And I think we're at that blow up point here. I think this thing blows up in the next year, almost regardless of what the Fed does, because they've already done. You can't print 5 trillion and say, well, that wasn't enough. That's a real sign of weakness. Well, all this leveraged lending and loans and stuff, but my favorite graph is simply one called percentage of zombie companies. These are not small businesses. Yeah. These are large public companies, and now it's up to 22 or 23% cannot pay their debt service. Again, small businesses have this problem all the time. No, these are large, established, major companies, and they cannot meet their debt service. So that's been rising steadily. You're getting more companies that are being kept alive after the last recessions that shouldn't have. And they're failing anyway. They're just failing because they can't be competitive. They're not failing because the economy's weak. But the other factor is, even with all this stimulus, the average growth rate in this whole 13-year boom has been like 1% to 2%. It's been lower than average with unprecedentedly high stimulus, which just proves the point. They're stimulating a dead economy. Let the economy die and remake itself, and then it'll be healthy again. It doesn't get healthy by taking more crack. I mean, anybody can take any drug you want, heroin, crack, alcohol, 10 cups of coffee, and get up, feel good for a couple of hours. That's what they've been doing to the economy nonstop. This does not end well. That's my view. And I think we're showing signs now, again, after $5 trillion. I mean, really, we should be growing at 10% a year when they just gave 23% of GDP in 2 years, dumped it into the financial assets, increased everybody's wealth. We should be growing like at light speed. I think this economy is going to fall apart by the end of the year. I keep telling people, my baby boomer friends like me in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, we are killing the millennial generation. These people are going to walk into the economy inheriting our debts and zombie companies, and they shouldn't have to do that. So I would love to see this get cleaned up in the next few years. The millennial boom, by the way, just like I predicted decades before it happened, the baby boom would be 83 to 2007, the rising tide of spending. The millennial boom is 2024 to 2037. So that boom is going to be shorter, but we need to clear out these debts before then so that boom can be as good as it should be for the next generation. Debt always matters to everybody. The key to debt is how you use it. My secret indicator, which I borrowed from Lacey Hunt in Austin, Texas, Dr. Lacey Hunt, the only PhD, classically trained economist that didn't get screwed up by taking too much economics. He understands how the economy actually works. It's all about how productively you invest your money, whether you raise equity or debt, and debt is cheaper, but it also has higher cash flow requirements, so it's more risky. So it depends on what you do with your debt, okay? So the government can borrow money. If they build roads and that sort of stuff, and long-term infrastructure, that can be very productive. The government will get revenues in the future and that it'll benefit the economy. If they borrow money to stimulate an economy that's already dead, this money's just gonna be flushed out, and they're still gonna have the debt. Same thing with companies. You can borrow money to invest in productive new plant and capacity. Companies haven't been doing that since 2008. They've been investing in buying their own stock buyback, leveraging their company, leveraged buyouts, all this sort of financial hanky-panky, which is not productive investment. It's just leverage and restructuring things superficially. So it's how you invest the debt. So the best indicator, and everybody should look this up, money velocity. The Roaring 20s was seeing money velocity drop like rock. It was a booming period, but the money was all speculative and people were just buying stuff because it was going up, just like now. And so it went down from 1917 into the early 30s, and we had a bubble boom and the Great Depression, a bubble burst. Money velocity would have told you that was inevitable. It's the best leading indicator. I'm talking a decade in advance, not months, a year. Well, it's been going down, guess what, since 98, right in the midst of our first tech bubble, when everything started going speculative, and all you do is you can't go wrong buying stocks, and everybody's leveraging up and borrowing and da-da-da. When the boom was actually starting to slowly lose steam with the baby boom from 2000 into 2007, the kind of that top plateau. Well, money velocity has been dropping worse than that, the worst in history from 98 straight into now, which says there's only one thing that's going to happen ahead, the biggest debt restructuring in history, which is not a recession, it's a depression. That sort of money velocity drop only preceded the Great Depression in the 1930s, and almost pretty much guarantees this. So what the governments are actually doing, they're almost smarter than you think they are. They keep printing more money because I think they intuitively know, after stimulating so long, and they thought a $1 trillion in 2008-9 would do it, we'd go back to normal. They've had to print more and more because it's a failing economy. They're trying to invigorate a dead economy. So money velocity says we are going nowhere, and we have tons of unproductive debt. And that's what you have to clear out. So they're no longer sucking up money or paying interest or paying dividends and wasting. And then you reinvest in the companies that survive that shakeout, in stronger companies that can grow again with less competition, because we wipe out the bad debts. We also wipe out the zombie companies I mentioned earlier.